Greetings and salutations, everyone. I hope everyone is still doing well, and welcome to this night-ending bonus upload. Yes, it is the bonus that brings us right up into Saturday Nightmares live from New York, 12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, our live stream. I hope to see you all there. Before we jump into this bonus, a couple links. As many of you know, I rely on Patreon, PayPal, channel membership, and the merch to help the channel to continue to grow and go. Links to Patreon, PayPal, and channel membership is in the description below. Merch displayed directly under the video. Also, Dogman Frightening Encounters, Volume 1 through 3, the audiobook versions. They were written and researched by Tom Lyons, narrated and produced by me, Jeff Nadolny. Those audiobooks are available on Audible, Amazon, and iTunes, links to which are also in the description as well. And finally, last but definitely not least, if you'd really like to help support the channel to continue to grow and go, simply subscribe. It does not cost a cent. Click the like button, takes half a second. If you don't want to miss out on any of the informative uploads that I put out daily, click that bell icon, and folks, please leave a comment. Why? Well, because all these things really do help the channel to continue to grow and go. And yes, folks, they definitely do matter. Now, everyone, I have taken far too much of your time. Let's jump in to this night-ending bonus upload, shall we? I had something happen to me a few miles outside of Gila National Forest, New Mexico. Some friends and I were camping out in the boonies down a game trail with seriously low levels of activity. I like that area of the Gila so much because a lot of it is logging land on the outskirts of legit unmapped woods. The first place we set up camp was pretty much on the edge of a pine thicket where the forest jutted up a ridge. Lots of trees still, but not as many as further in, if that makes any sense. Anytime I go camping in a place like the Gila's old-growth forest with nobody around, I like to smudge the area with a sage bundle, roll a cigarette as kind of an offering and cleansing. I have a master's degree in cultural anthropology, and I lend a lot of credence to indigenous belief, especially where it comes to wilderness. When I sat down by the fire, we set up to get the sage started, and it would not light. I used my lighter, I stuck it in the fire itself, but it wouldn't light. It just charred and the twine burnt up, but no significant smoke from the sage, which is eerie because usually that's a bad sign if you follow anything like that. I just let it go because it was pretty dark out by that time, and to suggest moving camp would have got me heckled pretty much by my friends. As night goes on, we're doing the typical camping stuff, playing guitar, singing, drinking beer, and roasting hot dogs. When we put out the fire, I noticed just how dark the forest line really was at night, and it spooked me very badly. We had seen a herd of elk on the game trail, heard some coyotes. I even saw a dinky-looking turkey wandering around at one point in the early afternoon, so I was aware of the wildlife around. But once that fire stopped popping, it was dead silent. Like there was just a heaviness to it. The three of us just kind of looked around in the dark, trying to get our eyes to adjust, but figured we had been staring at the fire for so long that we just gave ourselves reasons to be freaked out in the darkness. So we hopped in the tent, zipped it up, and just tried to get some sleep. About an hour passed before we all heard a very distinct sound of a bipedal walking very close to our camp, crunching on dry pine needles, twigs snapping, dirt getting kicked up. It sounded like a big burly man was stomping around in the middle of nowhere in the pitch black. Even writing this gives me the chills. The shit was unsettling. We all looked at each other from our sleeping bags, eyes wide and silent, as whatever this thing was passed by just once. It was so quiet no other life could be heard. Not sniffing or snuffing like a bear would. No elk calls, no sound of jingling or equipment like a hunter might. I honestly had no idea what in the world could make such a distinct thump, pause, but it was wild. None of us slept that night, and the next morning we moved camp down another game trail, somewhere far away from the looming ridge and pine line. Didn't see any evidence of anyone around us in at least a mile radius of our camp, and still I have no explanation for what we heard or experienced that night. As a side note, at the next place, we set up my sage bundle, lit it, and it burned its white milky smoke. This incident occurred in 2007 in the wilderness of Gila National Forest in New Mexico. I'm from New Mexico, and I was raised in Roswell, so this area I have visited several times prior with no issue. On this trip, I was with a group of about 10 people. We were 2 days into our trek with several more to go. For those who are not familiar with Gila, it is a stunningly beautiful area with trails that follow a winding river that curves through a canyon. There are high cliff sides jutting up hundreds of feet through some parts of the canyon and dense brush. Overall, it's very isolated and has an odd vibe to it in certain places. I've always associated that with the fact that it's an area with ancient Native American history, dating back at least 9600 BC, that I know of, or maybe even further. Lots of crazy stuff has happened there over the years, to be for sure. It has a compelling history. On this particular night, we camped in an area where the river makes a U-shape as it wraps through the canyon. It was a fun day. I even had managed to catch some trout that I ate for dinner. Right around dusk, I needed to relieve myself, so I wandered away from camp into what I would describe as a ravine or a arroyo, where the floodwaters drain into the river. There was dense brush and high-sloped banks on either side. All in all, it seemed a good place to go and do my business at the time. I made my way up the ravine, and thinking back on it, I walked an unreasonable distance from the camp, which I found strange. As if I kept walking, almost absent-mindedly, or was drawn further in, which is not my norm. As a preface, there is something I think many here are familiar with that is known as the silence. Typically, this phenomenon occurs in nature when there is a large predator in the area. Anyway, I noticed this eerie quietness, and I knew that something was very wrong. When I say quiet, I mean the silence is deafening, if that makes sense. By this time, it's nearly completely dark, and I'm out of earshot of my camp. Alarm bells instantly started blaring in my head and gut. My hair stood on end. I noticed a strange change in my perception, likely caused by the twilight phase change, but the light around me seemed to become shrouded in a shadow quite suddenly. It was almost like someone had one of those sliding dimming switches for a light bulb. You know that feeling you get when you're sitting somewhere in public and just feel like someone is looking at you? That's what happened, suddenly and intensely. A few moments later, I heard a loud and distinct crack and odd rustling from about 30 feet away. Above me, in a bush, it sounded like a person walking where no person should be. It sounded like human footsteps cracking twigs. I was petrified to make a move, but finished my business and stood as confidently as I could muster facing the direction of the sound. I was unarmed, and knowing what I know about predators, I didn't want to make myself appear any more vulnerable than I already was. I had encounters with bears, mountain lions, but this felt so much different. I didn't have the high ground figuratively and literally. I called out loudly, "Hello!" A few seconds passed, and the rustling continued in the distance, then just silence. With no response back after a few moments at this point, I felt beyond vulnerable and terrified. Unreasonably terrified. In hindsight, and after researching, I often wonder if infrasound played a role. With my hair standing on end, I took a few steps backward, and that's when I noticed the eyes. About 20 feet away above a bank in a ditch was a pair staring directly at me. I was in shock for a moment, as it was near where I heard the cracking. Slightly iridescent looking eyes high above me on the bank, high enough that they had to be either from a massive creature or a large creature in a tree branch. The silhouette didn't make sense. The shadows played tricks on my eyes and my mind. I honestly can't be sure if it was a large owl or something, but the circumstances and general feeling makes me believe otherwise. The silence and heaviness in the air was totally wrong, but it's hard to explain. Instinctively, I backed up as slow as I could, facing those eyes, and that's when I heard another crack right above me, which made me lose my shit because the noise was much closer. At this point, my fight or flight kicked in, and I turned and sprinted as fast as I could. Breathless, I made it back to the camp where I told my friends I thought there was a possible large predator in the area, and we should make sure our bear bags are up and take precaution. Thinking back on it, it could have been a mountain lion or a bear. Honestly, who knows? One thing I do know for certain is that I felt like I was in absolute danger, and all my alarm bells were screaming, "Get the hell out of there." It still freaks me out all these years later. The shade of that memory is always in the back of my mind whenever I'm in the woods alone. All in all, I'm just glad I'm not another backwoods missing person statistic. And I am too, my friend, and I am too. A couple of things that I honestly, his instincts were definitely right. I, for one, do not feel like this was it was definitely a large predator, but one that he was not thinking of. Well, he was probably thinking of it, but I don't think he wanted to mention it because I think then it would have made it more real for him. He's already had contact throughout his years with bears, mountain lions, etc. And like he said, there was a silhouette that did not make sense. So he obviously knew that it was not a bear, that it was not a mountain lion, that it was not a large owl. And yes, in that area, the Mexican spotted owl, which is one of the largest owls in North America, calls home. But I really honestly think that his gut was telling him, hey, I need to get out of here. And like he said at the end, like he or she said at the end, excuse me, I'm just glad I'm not another backwoods missing person statistic. You know, that sentence right there should go along with all of the missing 411s. And I really, really think that people who are involved in these missing 411 programs should really look into the cryptid portion of it a little bit more. I know I have started doing some investigative looking into it. I honestly think about 40% of the missing 411 is cryptid, and then probably another 40 possibly interdimensional or alien or extraterrestrial. I hate that word alien, extraterrestrial. Then maybe 20% human creepos. So I don't know. That's just my theory and my belief. So take it how you want it, and if you don't like it, throw it away. You know, that's what I do when I hear things that I don't really think that fits in, or if it really doesn't fit in but makes a little sense, I keep it. I don't throw everything away that doesn't make sense to me. I'd like to sometimes, but anyway, moving on. Today's second encounter is a encounter that I did cover as well about a month and a half, 2 months ago. There is at the end added encounters, actually. I apologize for that brief pause of stupidity. I used to work on Vandenberg Air Force Base near Lompoc, California. My office was on top of the mountain that was ceremonial Chumash land. Whenever ground was broken, we had to have a religious leader come out and bless the ground first. It's usually pretty foggy about halfway up the mountain, and I got used to driving it every day. But you have to keep eye out for deer, mountain lion, bear, and all sorts of other wildlife. One night at about 11 p.m. I'm driving down the mountain and had just gotten to the point where the fog was gone. In front of me was clear, but behind me was a wall of fog. As I got to a sharp turn, I saw what I thought was a large coyote in the road, so I slammed my brakes on. It looked like it had no fur and was covered in pale, leathery skin with a dog-like head. As I looked, it rose upon two legs. It was hunched over at the time, maybe 6 feet tall, but if it was standing straight, I'd guess 7 feet. It turned and looked right at me and slowly walked off the road into the brush. At the time, I was doing a class about Native American for my degree, and was in touch with Chumash members for my project. I asked them if they knew anything about it, and they simply said, "We do not talk about that." To this day, I'm 100% sure I saw a Skinwalker that night. The front arms had shoulders like a person. They were long and scrawny and had what looked like hands, but with long claws. They just kind of hung in front while it walked, almost down to its knees. It walked on its hind legs, with its shoulders hunched. It looked like it was used to walking on two legs, like it was normal, but did it very slowly, kind of strange looking. It was the first thing that made me worry about what I was seeing. Coyotes, bobcats, and mountain lions were so common up there that as long as you're in your car, you don't even think twice about them. Seeing something stand like that really makes you take notice. At the time I saw it, I had worked there for about a year. I worked there another year afterward until April of 2019. I went back around Christmas, and I still get the creepy feeling out there. I used to work at Vandenberg too. I saw something that could have been very similar. It was on the other side of the fence near one of the LF sites on the north side. It was obstructed by brush and the fog. It seemed kind of walking just lazily. My escort swore it was a coyote with mange, but it was way too big to be a coyote. It had to be larger than even a wolf. My guts tell me I saw exactly what you explained. This is the next response to that encounter. I am taking out the majority of curse words. Dude, that is crazy. I live in Lompoc right now. My friends and I have been going around there doing night hikes around Lompoc, mostly at the Surf and Nature Preserve inside the village, but every now and again we go to the canyon. Would you have happened to work around there? We know that there is base property around there, but for obvious reasons, we don't really know what the property actually is. Anyway, recently we went out there pretty deep into the night, and we pulled off onto that super thin road that only one car can travel down at a time. We parked, got comfy, and I started making jokes about how scary and effed we would be if anything went wrong. I was basically psyching my friends out. At one point I look up to this hill to the right of the car and suddenly felt like I was being stared at directly. It made me very uncomfortable, but I couldn't really place my finger on it. A couple of seconds later, my friend in the back, let's call him G, asks if we can leave. Now let me put this into perspective just for a quick second. We aren't football players or anything, but G's a pretty big guy, not the type of person that's easily shaken. But when he asked if we could leave, I could hear the uneasiness in his voice. The driver, C, started the car and we immediately pulled a 3-point turn and drove off. On the way back, G made a joke about how we were really psyched ourselves out because he was super creeped out back there. I said something along those lines of, "Yeah, I got ya." For me, I got chills when I looked up the dirt mound to our right. I felt like something was completely watching me. Instantly, the atmosphere changes and C goes, "Really?" I felt the same exact thing. This causes G to immediately concur, and we all just kind of sit there in silence for a bit, wondering what the heck could have made us all super uneasy like that. I'd like to add a little bit more context by stating I am usually the one to screw with my friends by making jokes about, and I kid you not, effing skinwalkers. I always thought the name was creepy on its own, but the idea it represents is really spooky. Basically, I don't get psyched out easy. My dad was a Marine, and he was always hard on me as a kid for being scared of the dark, so I grew up trying to prove myself that I was brave. Sorry for how scatterbrained and random this was. This event has been living in my head rent-free, and as soon as I read the word Vanderberg, I needed to say something because my blood ran cold. Quick interjection. That whole little piece right there is terrifying. What I really want to talk about is that something that irks me and constantly does is the creepypasta Reddit community has really just, I don't know, put a blemish on Native American lore and beliefs. I really hate when I hear that people are talking about I saw a skinwalker in Ohio or in the mountains of California. Because you didn't. You saw a shapeshifter, probably from another indigenous tribe, but you didn't see a skinwalker. They have their own name. They have their own cultural belief, and if you live in that area, you should kind of know a little bit about the history of the land you live in. That's just my take on that. I mean, I know a lot about the history of the land that I live in, and I'm sure the majority of you guys do too, because we find it interesting. Because where we live is interesting to us. You know, I mean, maybe not to the people on the outside. They just see, oh, that's, but to us, it's fascinating because there's history there. There's, indigenous tribes that thrived for hundreds of years before white European settlers moved in. I really find that last part kind of just rude. Making jokes about skinwalkers or shapeshifters. It's calling upon something that you really aren't prepared to deal with. I don't think anybody is. And no matter how tough you are or what your daddy was or this and that, boy, you ain't gonna handle a skinwalker or a shapeshifter in the middle of the night on an abandoned road. You're going to be scared. You're going to have a trickle of pee running down your leg while you're probably coddling your friend and crying, So I hope it does take rent in that dude's head, because he's just disrespectful in my eyes. And you never really hear me say stuff like this, but that last part kind of irks me a little. Sorry, guys. Moving on. Today's third encounter. Yesterday I went out to paint my garage doors around 9:30 in the morning. All morning I felt like I was being watched and could smell something which I thought was maybe septic. I kept hearing weird noises which sort of sounded like birds, but I knew they weren't, as there were no birds that make these noises. And me comparing it to a bird is the only way I can describe it. At about 11:45 in the morning, I heard a very loud knock come from behind me in the woods. When I turned around, I saw something, dark brown to black, as it turned around and began to walk away. The height was maybe 7 to 8 feet. grayish on the bottom of the feet, which I could see the leaves and debris sticking out to the feet and falling off. I didn't see the face as it was walking away. Its legs were about the size of both of my legs put together. The hair was very long and matted, and I could see muscle movement under. It moved through the woods like it was nothing. I'm only 6 feet, and I couldn't move through there that easily. Width had to be well over 4 feet at the shoulders, and the arms were to its knees. This walked like nothing I had ever seen before. I feel like it wanted me to see it. Couldn't tell its gender. By the time I snapped out of what I had seen, it was gone, and having paint on my hands, I couldn't get my camera. I will be completely honest here, that it scared the living crap out of me, and I never felt like that before. I heard it until 4 p.m., and the feeling of being watched didn't go away until then. It has become one of those sayings, be careful of what you wish for. I've not been able to sleep since then, as there is so much running through my mind. I will take a pic just to show how close it was to me, and how it got that close without me hearing it is something I can't explain. And that is what has scared me the most. When I settle down, I'm going out tomorrow to see what I can find. Anyone thinking it may have been a bear, definitely not, as bears don't walk on 2 legs. And I know the difference. I will admit that for the first few seconds, I did think it could have been a bear standing on its hind legs, until I saw it move. In a lot of ways, I wish it had been a bear, as that is a little easier for me to swallow.
Well, there you have it, folks, the night-ending bonus, the one that brings us right up into Saturday Nightmares live from New York. I hope to see you all there. I'd also like to thank you all for supporting the channel. After all, it is your support that keeps this channel growing and going, and what gives folks like all of us a place and a chance to share our experiences and theories judgment-free, simply treated with the respect that we all deserve. Thank you. Please stay safe, happy, healthy, and ever vigilant, keeping an eye on our children, pets, family, and friends. These creatures are real, they are out there and dangerous. Share this information with those you love and care about, and it may just help save their lives someday. Until next time, never stop asking questions, never stop searching for the truth, and God bless.